Evening, it is going to be a very tense week. The Secretary of State and the Iraqi Foreign Minister will meet in Geneva. The Congress will debate whether the U.S. should attack the Iraqis if they do not withdraw from Kuwait by the UN deadline, which is only 8 days away now. Based on the weekend's developments, neither Saddam Hussein nor George Bush has altered his position by so much as a comma. The increasing strain of possible war was particularly evident today. According to the U.S. military in Saudi Arabia, a number of Iraqi officers defected today, flying 6 helicopters. Iraqi soldiers have crossed over in the past, but if these officers cooperate, there could be an intelligence bonus. Our national security correspondent, John McWethy, is in London tonight with the Secretary of State, who is preparing for that crucial meeting with his opposite number on Wednesday.
In his march toward Geneva on Wednesday, Secretary Baker is building pressure on Iraq, visiting with key foreign ministers, and trying to present the picture of a coalition that is rock solid as it nears the January 15th deadline.
The only real chance that we have for peace, in my opinion, is if Saddam Hussein begins to understand that that deadline is real and that we are serious. We need to hear less talk from Baghdad, and we need to see some action.
The president of the European community said he does not think Saddam Hussein is getting the message.
It seems that he doesn't hear it, so it has to be repeated again and again.
Even the French, after sending a special envoy to Baghdad and floating a peace proposal that the U.S. has rejected, were saying today they have not changed their view. Foreign Minister Dumas said Iraq must withdraw from Kuwait without condition. And in Saudi Arabia, where Britain's new Prime Minister John Major just arrived, there was scorn for rumors that Saddam Hussein wants the January 15th deadline pushed back.
If he's concerned about the deadline, then the solution is in his own hands. He can start moving out of Kuwait tonight.
In private, Baker is arguing that as time runs out on the January 15th deadline, it is more essential than ever to make the threat of war frighteningly credible to Saddam Hussein. To that end, Baker may try a little psychological warfare when he meets with Tariq Aziz on Wednesday by hinting that if war breaks out, wherever Iraq's leaders try to hide, American spy satellites will find them. John McWethy, ABC News, London.
Well, as of this moment, there are no obvious signs that any of this is getting through to Saddam Hussein. As ABC's Sheila McVicker reports from Baghdad, his public message has not changed at all.
Linked in an embrace, Palestine Liberation Organization Chairman Yasser Arafat and the second most powerful man in Iraq, Taha Yassin Ramadan. A picture with a message meant for Washington. Iraq has joined withdrawal from Kuwait to resolution of the Palestinian issue. Now, just 2 days before Tariq Aziz and James Baker meet in Geneva, the Iraqis are trying to make the Palestinian question the main issue.
The Palestinian problem must be solved now.
Senior Iraqi officials say an international peace conference is no longer enough. The Iraqis now want guarantees and a timetable of Israeli withdrawal from the occupied territories. Even in Baghdad, this hard line is seen as a starting position for negotiations. But Iraqi officials also say the talks in Geneva will not necessarily fail if Baker has little to offer on the Palestinians. Because the Americans called for this meeting, they say James Baker should speak first. And Iraqi officials warn if the U.S. has nothing new to put on the table to discuss, neither will Iraq. Senior Iraqi officials say if there is no progress in Geneva, they will try to push back the UN's January 15th deadline by inviting diplomats and envoys to Baghdad, an attempt to give the appearance of ongoing discussions. But in private, they say, this crisis can be resolved peacefully only between Washington and Baghdad. Sheila McVicker, ABC News, Baghdad.
Our latest polling continues to show that while there is enormous support for the idea of Secretary Baker and Tariq Aziz meeting on Wednesday, there isn't much hope that they'll accomplish anything. Only 49% of those we asked think the talks will lead to a diplomatic solution. And 68% continue to support the use of military force if that is required to get Iraq out of Kuwait. The strongest supporters of a military solution are those people who think a war would be brief and U.S. casualties light. We have another look tonight at some of the troops who would expect to be in the thick of it if there's a war. It has always been an important part of the Marines' esprit de corps that when the U.S. goes to war, the Marines are the first into battle. It has been the case far more often than not. But this time, If there is a ground war with the Iraqis, the Marines may well not be in the vanguard. ABC's Bob Zelnick is in Saudi Arabia.
Frontline Marines from the 2nd Division have been told they have only days to get their weapons combat ready. These Marines expect to lead the assault against Iraqi forces, a notion encouraged by visiting political leaders.
If our shield must become a sword, you, Marines, will be the tip of that sword.
But many military strategists here, including Marine officers themselves, paint a different picture. They say the Marines are a light, mobile force, likely to play a limited, supporting combat role.
The Marine Corps is not really designed to be the heavy blow that will come crashing down. Sometimes we do need those heavy assets.
And the heaviest assets belong to the Army. Compared to the Marines, its tanks are more numerous and sophisticated, its troop carriers more heavily armed, and its tank-killing helicopters more modern. However eager these Marines may be to lead an assault, their role in a war is likely to be more modest, defending against an Iraqi counterattack or seizing areas left open by shifting Iraqi positions. For these men, their most critical mission may already have been accomplished, getting here 2 months before the Army's heavy divisions arrived, thereby putting a force on the ground to deter a possible Iraqi attack. Bob Zelnick, ABC News, with the Marines in eastern Saudi Arabia.
The State Department expressed concern again today that Americans and American facilities overseas could become the targets of terrorist attacks. The spokesman said there have been repeated examples of plans for such attacks ever since Kuwait was invaded. And earlier today, Saddam Hussein warned again that in case of war, the battle would reach outside of Iraq to the rest of the world, as he put it. In a moment, the Pentagon cancels expensive plans for a Navy plane. Fears that an arms treaty with the Soviets may be in trouble. And on the American agenda tonight, the first in a series of reports.
The training will last only 1 week. The Pentagon wants those Kuwaiti volunteers in Saudi Arabia by the January 15th deadline. Tom?
Thank you, Fred Francis at the Pentagon. And there were these other developments in the Gulf crisis today. Congress will begin full debate on U.S. policy this Thursday. That's 1 day after the Baker-Aziz meeting in Geneva. The White House said the Bush-Gorbachev summit scheduled for Moscow next month could be delayed. It cited the Gulf crisis and possible problems on arms control. And the State Department said it is on the alert for pro-Iraqi terrorism. It said it has detected planning for such attacks, especially in Europe and in the Middle East. If it does come to war, the American military operation will convert from a shield to a sword. And that conversion already is underway with a series of increasingly realistic exercises in the desert. NBC's Gary Matsumoto tonight in Saudi Arabia.
This exercise might soon become reality for the 82nd Airborne.
We are confident that we're going to war. The Iraqis had no choice but to leave Kuwait by the 15th of January. It's not going to happen. And all our soldiers know that's not going to happen.
The view of many soldiers, Saddam Hussein is taking them lightly.
At 1 week away, I still don't think Saddam Hussein seriously thinks we're coming. And I'd like to tell him we will be there if ordered by President Bush. And we will be ready to go and fight in 1 week.
American civilians are getting ready by getting out of Saudi Arabia.
Well, several have. A lot of dependents have.
Many, like J.D. Haas, choose to stay.
I'm not scared, I'm not frightened, but I am taking, whatever precautions they offer, certainly.
British preparations have intensified. They're practicing clearing mines, bulldozing, sweeping through trenches, the most common Iraqi defense. The difference from previous live-fire exercises, the scale. Engineers, infantry, and armor, all attacking in unison. Many soldiers, American and British alike, say they're writing off diplomacy. They're practicing with vigor what they believe they'll be called upon to do. Gary Matsumoto, NBC News, Eastern Saudi Arabia.
When Nightly News continues, in this country, a big bank failure and what it means for depositors and taxpayers alike.
Preparations for a long war, pessimism and foreboding about prospects for a negotiated settlement as Iraq counts down to confrontation. This is the CBS Evening News. Dan Rather reporting from Baghdad, Iraq. Good evening. This Arab capital is talking and thinking war. Top Iraqi government officials tell CBS News that there is no chance, none, that withdrawal from Kuwait can even begin before the UN deadline, now just 9 days away. Several of these Iraqi officials say that unless something changes, something in President Bush's tone and position, they just don't see how there can be a negotiated settlement. Western diplomats are beginning to question whether Saddam Hussein's cool exterior isn't the fatalistic resolve of a man willing to bring the house down if necessary to meet what he sees as his own personal rendezvous with destiny.
We do not recognize that deadline. We simply don't recognize it.
Iraq's Foreign Minister Tariq Aziz tonight in an exclusive interview with